Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Today, early voting continues for those Texas constitutional amendments. That's on everybody's ballot in the state of Texas. A few other places have other issues on the ballot as well. But there's been some talk of the Texas constitutional amendments. It's gotten lost, I think, in other news of the day, and probably the proposition that's getting the most headlines is Proposition 4, and that's something we'll talk about. We're going to talk about all the Texas constitutional amendments that you can go and vote for. Our next guest in studio, Representative John Frullo, back with us here on KFYO, and Representative Frullo, always good to visit with you and have you back in studio.
Well, thank you, Chad, and thanks for the opportunity to come here and visit with you. Of course, the last time we were down there in the state capitol building, so that was kind of fun and exciting.
Yeah, I think y'all were deciding on some of these different amendments during that time.
We probably were. We're the ones that pushed them on through, and I think that one thing that I'd like to just point out, and of course, a lot of your listeners being informed know how it works, but for those that don't, Texas is kind of unique from the standpoint that we as the individual citizens can decide how we want to change our Constitution. And, every other year we do that. We vote on constitutional amendments, and there's usually, less than a dozen or so. This year there's a few extra, or a few more than last time. But what we do is we actually amend that Constitution, change it for the items that are here. And so this year, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and so what I basically want to do with you is go through the amendments and also get kind of what your thoughts are on why these were passed out of the House and then out of the Senate and onto the ballot for people to vote on. What the thinking was behind getting these and kind of how it would impact the day-to-day lives of citizens. So we'll start with Proposition 1, right?
Well, let me actually even take a step back from there and talk a little bit about how it happens. So normally when we're down there passing the laws and we have over 7,000 bills that are filed and end up, passing somewhere a little over 1,000 bills become law, and they become part of the state laws that govern it, the state statutes. What that takes is it takes more than half in the House to vote for it, more than half in the Senate to vote for it. It goes through the same committee process that everything else goes through. It gets filed, and then it gets, the chair decides if it's going to get heard, and then it goes through the committee process, it goes through the House, it goes through the Senate, it goes to the governor, and once it passes all of those places, it becomes state law. The difference on a constitutional amendment is there's a higher bar. It's harder to get that done. Mm-hmm. So it takes 2/3 of the House, it takes 2/3 of the Senate, and then it goes to the people to vote on. And so that's what's happening here.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start with Proposition 1. Tell us what this is, a constitutional amendment permitting a person to hold more than one office as a municipal judge at the same time.
Right. And what that is being done for is to help the smaller communities where they may not have, a person that's able to serve, willing to serve. And so this way, if you have in one nearby community a person that's willing to serve, they can serve in multiple jurisdictions. And, it helps those areas be better served with, on the judicial side. And so it's a good thing. It's, they don't have to do it, but it makes it available if you have, the requirements there.
Gives them the option of doing that.
Exactly. And it's not for Lubbock. Lubbock, we've got our own systems here. We have, the judges set up. It's for smaller areas that just don't have the population.
All right. Proposition 2, the constitutional amendment providing for the issuance of additional general obligation bonds by the Texas Water Development Board in the amount not to exceed $200 million to provide financial assistance for the development of certain projects in economically distressed areas. It's a bit wordy, and that means people probably don't fully understand what's going on here.
What this is basically it's additional money that's already been voted for years ago. So this was set up years ago. It was enabled years ago, and what they're doing now is putting more money into it. And I think that the state in general has started looking at water resources, not only how to provide it to people, how to make money available, make it available at a lower interest rate so that communities can get it. But then also we're looking at a lot more. And of course, Chairman Perry, our own Charles Perry, has been working a lot on getting this type of legislation through, getting it worked on, and making sure that it's available so that we can, one, use that water or get rid of that water. And, that's going to be one of the biggest challenges of the state. I remember, probably it was about 2 sessions ago where, somebody was talking about a billboard up in the Northwest that said, go ahead, when people are moving to Texas and people are continuing to move to Texas. And the billboard said, go ahead and move to Texas. You'll be back here in 10 years when they run out of water. Well, we want to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that would not be good. Proposition 3, constitutional amendment authorizing the legislature to provide for a temporary exception from ad valorem taxation of a portion of appraised value of certain property damaged by a disaster.
Right. And what this does, and this is part of what happened with the huge hurricane that we had, and then the flooding that happened in Houston. And when your property values fall, but you're still being taxed at a rate that was set back when the property was good, when it was functioning, this gives some relief from that. So it's helping the folks that are hurt in that situation. So, it's one of those deals. It's kind of like insurance. You really, don't want it, may not even, like it, but when you need it, it's available and helps the folks that are in the toughest of positions.
The next proposition, this is the one that maybe has made the most headlines and has also confused people. Maybe not the most, but it's confused a lot of folks, and I want to spend some time on this because there's some controversy out there around it as well. This is dealing with an income tax or a possible income tax. How it would read on the ballot: the constitutional amendment prohibiting the imposition of an individual income tax, including a tax on an individual's share of partnership and unincorporated association of income. Tell us what this would do if people vote for Proposition 4.
Oh, well, did that make it on there? No, you're right. This is absolutely the one that has gotten the most talk about it. And it currently right now it is in our state laws, again, going back to those statutes, that we will not have a state income tax. And that's the way it's written. And so on our Texas books, in essence, in our Texas laws, it says that we will not have a state income tax. What this does is it brings it additionally into the Constitution, and it goes through that process I talked about. 2/3 of the House voted, 2/3 of the Senate, and now it is going out to the people. And if half of those people, half of our voters out there say, we don't want a income tax in the state of Texas, then all of a sudden it's in that constitutional format, which means it's a higher bar to reverse. It's not saying it can't ever be reversed. We saw that on the at the federal level with the prohibition, where it was put in place and then later taken out. Mm-hmm. What this does is it makes it a higher bar to create a state income tax in the state of Texas, individual tax there. And so I think it's important. I've never been a fan of the income tax. I don't like the income tax. We're one of 5 states that don't have an income tax, and people are moving here. We've got a great economy. Good things are happening in the state of Texas. I'm not for creating another bureaucratic department that's going to go out and start doing that and charge more money. And, at the end of the day, we don't need it. And so what this does is, with the conservative leadership that we have in place right now, we're saying let's raise that bar. And what it does, it makes it much more difficult in the future to reverse this.
How would it be possible to reverse it in the future?
You go through the same process we just went through, and you get 2/3 of the folks, it goes, somebody has to file it. They'll file a bill saying that we want to get rid of the prohibition against this, having a state income tax. And so somebody will file it in the House, it'll go through the committees, it'll get heard, it'll have to be voted out of committee, it'll go to the House floor. Let's say the process, this is just one way, then it goes to the Senate, it goes through the thing, it has to go through a committee, it gets brought out on the Senate floor, they vote for it. 2/3 of each of the bodies have to vote to say that they would want to reverse what is happening. Now, why they'd want to do that, I don't know, but that's what it would take to do. And then it would go out to the people again. The people would say, yep, get rid of that. We want a tax. And then it would be reversed. And then, of course, then you'd have to set up the mechanism, because that in and of itself doesn't say, okay, now we got a tax. Here's the forms to fill out. It just sets the groundwork up. Then you have to go back and start working on how would that be put in place? Not me, because I wouldn't be for that. But, how would you put something like that in place? How would you get it going? There are some groups out there that do not like this because they say, well, it keeps a source of revenue from being available to generate money for the state. So, if you are sitting there getting money from the state or participating that some way, they are typically the folks that,
You've got, the Texas State Teachers Association, they came out, one of their spokespeople came out against this and said, we're not saying right now we need an income tax, but maybe in the future we're going to need an income tax. And if we ever do have an income tax, a lot of that money comes towards public education. They're trying, to me, what I've seen on social media and through a few others is they're trying to say that, the education community is against this because it would harm public education. Would Prop 4 harm public ed?
I don't think so, because we do not have that state income tax right now, and pub ed and higher ed had one of the best sessions they've ever had. And so the money that is flowing into public and higher ed is, was phenomenal this last session. And the thing that
it seemed like you guys were applauded by a lot of these same education groups.
We were and continue to be, and they're very happy with what we did. And one of the things that I'm kind of excited about is to see what happens in education now. Forever the drumbeat from, especially public ed was more money. We need more money. We've got to pay more. So we are paying more. And so we expect, and we'll be watching this. We want the outcomes to be better. Higher graduation rates, people ready to get out when they get that graduation certificate. They are ready to go out in the workforce, go to college, go to a trade school, maybe, go and serve our country. But they are ready for those type of positions to go out and be law-abiding and self-sustaining individuals. So I think that's exciting. We saw a few years ago when we raised the trooper salaries, and had many comments from a number of folks high up in that organization saying, John, thank you for doing that. And what it did is a couple of things. One is the standard of people that applied for those jobs went up. Additionally, the people that were in those positions stayed in there. So we weren't spending a lot of money and time training, getting great, officers, patrolmen, out there, and then all of a sudden they can leave and go work for a city or a county or some other and make a lot more money. So as we're doing this, I think that we're going to see some great increases. And if not, then, we'll look at that time.
Yeah. But as far as Proposition 4 goes, it's not going to hurt public education.
I don't see that happening.
And if you want to make it harder in the future for a future legislature to pass an income tax, you need to vote for.
Exactly. You vote for it.
Okay.
You're voting for the prohibition.
Got it. All right.
Kind of a little, a little wordy, kind of misunderstanding. But yes, a vote for is a vote for the prohibition against a tax.
Very good. All right, let's do this. Let's go ahead and take our break, Jody. When we come back, we've got a handful more propositions to get into, including Proposition 5. We'll get to that when we come back. Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. All right, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO. In studio with us right now, Representative John Frullo. We're talking about the Texas constitutional amendments. Just got done talking about Proposition 4. Now we're at Proposition 5. And this one having to deal with Texas Parks and Wildlife. The wording here, constitutional amendment dedicating the revenue received from the existing, and that's a key word, I think, existing state sales tax and use taxes that are imposed on sporting goods to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and the Texas Historical Commission to protect Texas's natural areas, water quality, and history by acquiring, managing, and improving state and local parks and historic sites while not increasing the rate of the state sales and use taxes. So what's this all about?
Can you reread that?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what it
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet, yeah. What this has to do with is the allocation of the money. As you mentioned, we are already paying, so this is not any type of new source. What it is we are now saying that money needs to go to where it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
And that's parks, wildlife, historic sites. Last year, the state parks received 9.7 million visitors, or actually in 2017. The last year that we have available. And so what this is going to do is make sure that those are taken care of, that the money that we're spending on those particular items are going there, and it's going to help. And matter of fact, I had a call from some folks here in Lubbock that are really big into the bighorn sheep and the reestablishment of bighorn sheep, and they want to know if that money is going to go to the wildlife management areas that exists out there, and in discussion with the folks at Parks and Wildlife, it's not specifically going to go there, but what it does is it gives them more money, and so that there's a chance that money can go to that particular area and help out and get to where it's been short. One of the things that we learned is when the hurricane came through, that people were using the park sites as places to stay, in places that, maybe just had a few hundred people were now having thousands of people. And so partially they were damaged, and they need to be fixed up and stuff. And so we saw that at the, just many different locations. So this is a good thing. Basically what we're doing is saying, and it prohibits in the future money not to be spent where we think it's going when we buy those particular items.
We've got about 2.5 minutes left.
Okay,
so I want to
blow through.
Yeah, I want to get through Proposition 6. What would that do?
That has to do with CPRIT, and what that is cancer research. It's already something that has been done earlier. Initially, there were $3 billion worth of bonds that were used. That money is being spent, being invested for research. What we're doing is saying, okay, this program has worked out well, and we're going to do another $3 billion. One of the beneficiaries in our backyard is Texas Tech, so it's able to use that money for research, attract people. It's good for the community.
Prop 7.
Prop 7. That has to do with the distribution of available school funds. And so that money is already being used for that purpose. What this does is increase the distribution.
Okay. And Proposition 8.
Proposition 8 has to do with flood infrastructure. We sort of talked about that a little earlier. Drainage, flood control projects in Texas. This is a good deal. It helps folks that otherwise may not be able to work on those projects.
Proposition 9.
Proposition 9 is basically exempting precious metals held in Texas from property tax. So what's happening there is people that have a lot of gold, not me, but folks like yourself, Chad.
Yes.
You're being taxed on that in Texas. So you say, well, instead of keeping it in Texas, I'm going to go some other state that's not going to tax me. This says bring it back to Texas, and we're not going to tax you.
Okay. And Proposition 10, the final one.
This is probably the most feel-good one on there. What it does is it says that if you are, in law enforcement and you have a canine, that when that dog is ready to retire, reach the end of its service life, it gives you the ability to be able to be given that dog rather than having to go through the normal process of what we do with, in essence, surplus items. That dog is not a surplus item. People that have these dogs, they eat, sleep, and drink with them. They take a trip on an airplane, they buy a seat for that dog to go on that trip, or they drive in their car. So it's just like any of us. It's a family member. This says that you keep it.
Yeah. All right. You've got 10 propositions on the ballot, and the Texas Constitutional Amendment election going through the end of next week. Early voting is when you can vote. Representative Frullo, good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right. We wrapped it up. We got to all 10. How about that? Chad Hasty Show.